Hello everyone, this is the Northeast Tableau user group and welcome, thanks for attending. My name is Christine Huntley and I'm a Tableau advocate and I've been using Tableau for a couple of years now I use other systems such as Power BI, but Tableau is definitely my favourite.
I'm Jonathan Hastings, a Tableau advocate. Desktop specialist, been using Tableau for about on and off about 6 months. And so as part of this, these will all be available after the presentation as well. Just some Tableau additional community things. So it's Back to Biz Basics, Workout Wednesday, Sports Biz Sunday, Mentor Opportunities, and Tableau Public as well, which you can have just to look over. And I'll jump onto the agenda.
Yeah, so we've got next we've got Lorna Brown, speed tipping, and then after that we'll have a quick Q&A session. Then we've got Ginny, day scaffolding for daily tracking, fill in the blanks, and then we'll have Q&A after that. And then we've got Mark Bowles, data stories, and again Q&A, and then we'll close the session. So if you've got any questions during the presentations, please just use the Q&A button at the bottom. And as I say, we'll do the Q&A sessions at the end of each session. So Lorna, are you ready to rock?
I am indeed. Thank you very much for having me and welcome everybody. I will just share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to take you through some of my speed tipping from my Data 22 session for the one that's just the Tableau conference that's just happened in May this year. So I'm going to go through 3 different tips, advanced mapping, some small multiples, and then how to highlight the background. For those that don't know who I am, my name is Lorna Brown. I'm one of the data school coaches here in the UK, in London specifically, and I'm a Tableau visionary and Tableau public ambassador. I also co-lead Workout Wednesday, so if you do have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out and I can help you. My Twitter handle is _Lorna_Brown, and my DMs are open, so if you have any questions, please do let me know. So without further ado, I'm going to get going so that we can see what we have in store. So the first section that I'm going to do is going on to advanced mapping. Now, when we're talking about advanced mapping, it's all about multiple mark layers, which came out in 2020.4 in Tableau. So it allows you to have multiple marks on top of each other. So here we have a buffer, we have points, we have lines, and we have 4 different mark types on top of each other. So let's start building. I have filtered to 2 specific airports just to keep it easy. The first thing that I need to do is I need to create an origin destination. And to do that, I'm going to use the functionality called make point. So I do make point of my latitude and make point of my longitude. And that just allows me to create a geometric spatial point, which when I double click, it will create that point into my map itself. Now, you may not be able to notice this, but as I hover over, both points actually highlight themselves rather than individual points. And that's just because of my level of detail. So what I need to do is I need to break this down so that I have just my individual data points on here. So I'm just going to change this one to a square. I'm going to change the color to, let's go black for now. So this is my origin point of my airports. I now need to find out the destinations of all of those points. Now, to save a little bit of time, I have already pre-created that calculation, but it's very similar to the one before. It's make point of my destination latitude and destination longitude. If I now drag and drop it on, I have this option called marked layers. And what this does is this, again, just adds that additional layer on top of my data set. So I now have all of my points. And again, I'm just going to break it down by individual airport so that when I hover over, I can see what the destination is that particular airport is going to. Now, what I want to also now be able to do is have lines between my destination or my origin and my destination. So we can do that with another calculation called make line. And this time, all we're going to do is we're going to use our origin make point and our destination make point. And that's just going to be able to create as a line between our origin and our destination. So if I can drag and drop that on, what you'll now see is this is now creating me 3 individual map layers onto my map itself. Prior to 2020.4, you could only have 2 layers on top of your maps by using dual axis. But now we have our lines. And again, I'm just going to break this down by destination name and origin name. So I can now hover over every single line on my chart to see where Las Vegas airport flies to and where New York airport flies to as well. But as you can see, if I go back, I have this option of buffer around my airport. So right now, this is, I think, buffered to 500 miles away from my origin airport. So I can see which airports I can go to within 500 miles. So I'm going to create that first off. So the first one I need to do is create a calculation called buffer. And this again allows me to use that geometry point. So I want a buffer around my origin of 500 mi. So if I click OK, and again, I'm going to drag and drop that onto the middle, which then shows me these buffers. This is in front of all of my mark layers, but what I can do is I can drag it to the bottom, which then sends it behind my mark layer. I can also change the color of it so that it's a little bit, a bit better to be able to see. The next section is I want to just be able to filter to everything that's within that buffer. Now, unfortunately, with a product, I can't just then add the buffer into my filters. I can't use the buffer to filter anything, but what I can use is another calculation called distance. So I can use the distance between my origin and my destination in miles. And I can say that is less, I want that less than or equal to 500. And when I click OK, I can drag and drop that onto my filters and click true. And this will now allow me to only have those specific airports that are within that 500-mile radius around the origin airport. And again, I can move things around so that my origin actually comes up top. So my square is at the front, and I can change lots of different things. If I didn't want my buffer to highlight or be able to be selected, I can click on my drop down and click disable selection. And now when I'm trying to click on it, I don't have the option. I only have the options for my lines or my points on my map itself. So it just allows me to have 4 or 5 different layers on this map and be able to visualize maps in a much better way. So that is my section number 1. My section number 2 is small multiples. Now, whenever I'm building small multiples, I always refer back to a blog by Andy Kriebel, which allows me to create these specific things. But what I'm going to do is hopefully going to teach you how that works, and then also how to parameterize that. So if I move forward, instead of having an even number, I can then change the amount of squares I have across the top, which will then change the number of squares that I have going down as well. So if I wanted 2, it would then go down X amount, or if I wanted 3, 4, etc. So just allows us to have a little bit of a play with the different types of parameters that we're using. But first off, we need to start creating our individual small multiples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you the way that this would work within Tableau itself. Now, if I start out with I'm just going to start out with columns, but I'm going to build it up as we go. The function index just gives us a 1 to X value so that we can give it sort of like a record ID. So we're going to do that by subcategory itself. I'm just going to -1 off that because then I want it to start at 0. So when I click OK, I'm just going to drag that onto my text. You'll see that kind of it goes from 0 all the way through to 16. And then what I can do here is what I want to be able to do is I want to use the function round square root of the size. Now the biggest one here, the one that's most important is size. And what size does is it basically takes the number of marks that I have in my view, and then we're going to square root that and round it to give us this particular number. Now, as you can see, these are decimals, but there's one common number in all of these. So I have 4 zeros, I have 4 ones, I have 4 twos, 4 threes, and 1 4. So if I just wrap all of this in an int function, this then allows me to have my 0 through to 4 on my actual subcategories themselves. I'm just going to duplicate this one because this one now is going to be my rows option. So if I do this, the only difference that I'm going to do is instead of this divide sign, I'm going to put a % sign, which is called a modulo, which takes the remainder rather than taking the original number itself. So if I click OK, what you'll see now is if I also put that onto text, you'll see that I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way through. So I'm getting those individual elements of that. This just allows me to put them into the small multiples elements as I go forward. Now, I'm just going to bring these into my view. So first off, I'm actually going to make them both discrete because I want them to be dimensions so that I have headers. So I'm just going to put my columns up here and my rows in here. I might have got these calculations slightly incorrect, but we'll see kind of as we go. And then I'm going to put my subcategory onto detail. Now, before I start changing anything, again, I need my sales, but I also need my month. I have created a specific month of order date field. I right-clicked on my order date, create custom date, and just use that as a sort of like the individual months on their own. And then I also, I'll come over that in just a second, but I also need the normal months on here. So in fact, let me just put this one onto detail as well, because we're going to change some things in a minute. The one that's on my row, on my columns, I am going to change that to an attribute to start with. Now, there's a reason for this. In fact, before I do that, I'm going to show you the reason why. So in here, I'm going to edit my table calculation, and I want it to, I want to tick both of these options, and then I want it at the level of subcategory. Same again with my rows. So I'm going to tick both of these options at the level of subcategory. Now, one thing that you might notice is this first box looks really good and everything looks fine. And then it goes a little bit wonky on my second box and my third box and so on and so forth. But actually what's happening is our data set isn't full. So again, when you come onto Ginny's session, this might help and not stop having you to do these type of calculations. But I'm missing order date months in my data set. So not every subcategory is solved for every order date. So I'm missing some data. Now, what I can do is if I change this to an attribute, what happens is Tableau magically picks all of this up and works it out. Now, I do have my columns and rows on the wrong way around. And so this is what it should look like. So slightly confusing in the way that I've named them, but essentially you kind of get the drift. I now have my small multiples sorted in the way that I want them to be. It's really important to make sure you have the original order date months on your detail and your attribute of dates on the columns to make it work. The other things that I want to do is I'm just going to sort this. So sort my subcategory by my sum of sales. So I'm then left with my highest ranking subcategory at the top. Now, right now, the only way I know that this is my highest subcategory is or what subcategory it is by hovering over a particular point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a way of putting the labels on so that they're there, but also not there. So I'm first off going to unshow my headers on my rows and columns. I don't need them anymore. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a new field in and call this the average of 1. And you might be able to see where this is going ever so slightly. But on my average of 1, I'm going to put my subcategory onto label. I'm going to reduce the opacity of my line all the way down to nothing. And I'm going to right click on my average of 1 and click dual axis. Now, I'm also going to go ahead and remove measure names from my panes. But what you can see here is if I then unshow this header, I'm not going to synchronize them. But what you can see now is in the top right-hand corner of all my boxes, I have my specific subcategory that that box is related to. So that's how you do this type of small multiples. The other option is to be able to do the small multiples using a parameter. So I'm just going to duplicate this worksheet, and I'm also going to duplicate these two calculations. In my columns copy, instead of this option at the very right-hand side, I'm just going to use my parameter called small multiples and put my bracket there. And the same with my rows copy is I'm also going to replace everything on the right-hand side with my small multiples and close with my bracket. So if I just show this parameter here, oh, no, not that one, sorry. Let me try that again. So I have my small multiples and I can click through. If I now put my columns copy on and my rows copy on, again, just need to edit my table calculations, subcategory, and then at the level of subcategory, same with this one. We want subcategory order date at the level of subcategory. And what this does is if I now switch it to 2, I now have 2 columns instead of 3 or 4 or 5, depending on the use case as to how you want to make this work, but it just allows you to have flexibility depending on your device size rather than the number of marks that you have. And then finally, as I'm coming up to time, what I want to do is if I go on to my next section, what I want to be able to do is highlight a specific region and category that has a higher total sales than 2,500. If I also change this to 200K, it will then highlight those specific regions and categories that have a higher sales than 200K. So how do we go about doing that? Again, there are several ways that we can make this work. We can either use table calculations or level of detail. So I'm going to show you both ways. So first off, I'm going to do my favorite total sales LOD. So what I want to be able to do is I want to fix at my region and my category for the sum of sales. And what this does is this just takes me the total sales for each individual region and each individual category. And if I put that onto my rows, you'll kind of see that the values are the same across all of my months as well, because we're excluding months to get the total sum of sales. I'm just going to leave that there for now. The other option is using window sum. So if I do window sum of my sum sales, what I can do now is I can change that level of detail depending on the granularity that I want. So right now it's doing it at the monthly level. So if I go in here, what I want to do is I want to say give me the sum of sales for each region and category, not broken down by order date months. So basically that's saying restart every region and every category and give me the sum of sales for that particular section that I'm looking at. So again, that gives me the same value as before. The other calculation that you could do is total, and total does the same as window sum. But again, just going to stick with my LOD sales from before. And the way that we did the other one is we used the average of 1 to get the line across the top. And we can do the same here. The difference is instead of the line, I'm going to change this to a square, an area. So it kind of fills up that option at the bottom. Now, again, just going to hit dual axis, and I'm going to not hit synchronize this time. I'm going to take measure names off of my colors. So again, it kind of is getting that feel as to what's happening. I am also going to move my to the back so that my line is in front of my area chart. And now what I need to do is I need to just create a true false calculation, which is my LOD greater than or equal to my parameter? And if it is, it's going to give me true. And if it's not, it's going to give me false. So now you can kind of see where we're going with this. If I edit my colors, I can hit my true to be sort of like a dark teal and my false to be a white, which will then grey out in the background and just highlight these options. So if I change this to black. When I go to my parameter, if I change this to 50K, what happens then is it only focuses on the ones that are above 250K for my total sum of sales. And again, just some extra formatting to clean this up, so removing my headers. It just allows for that a little bit more insight whenever you're looking at a particular chart type itself. That was super speedy, but also gives us time for some questions as well. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and I'm happy to help.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
That was brilliant.
Nice.
Yeah, we haven't actually got any questions, but we've got a comment saying, love this trick, must find a place to use it. So yeah. But yeah, has anybody got any questions? If you want to just raise your hand on here. Nope. Okay, well, thanks very much, Lorna.
Do you have any questions as organisers?
I'm just trying to think of when I can use that. As I say, just basically what the comments just said, you know, just I want an excuse to use it. So yeah. How about you, Jonathan?
I think, can you use the highlight option? Say if you've got two individual charts or two sheets on the same dashboard, could you use that highlight option? Or would you have to incorporate within a small models?
You know, you can use it as sort of like individual options, as well as it's just a dual axis with an area chart. So it can be put on multiple. I just kind of showed it as the small multiple section because it kind of shows the highs and lows, but you can also use it on bands or KPIs or anything like that, as long as you have that parameter and that true false option.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to use that. Thanks very much, Lorna.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, I will stop sharing, and like I said, I will send over the workbook shortly so that you can send it out to everyone that was here. So thank you for listening, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
You too.
Wonderful. And now I've got Ginny doing date scaffolding for tracking daily fill in the blanks. If you'd like to take it away.
I certainly will. Thank you so much for having me. It's my first time presenting internationally. So I'm Ginny. I'm from North Carolina in the States, and I work for Appalachian State University. And today I'm going to talk to you about date scaffolding for tracking daily blank. And it's blank because you can fill in the blank. You can track a lot of things on a daily basis. So some of the things that I track from my job in higher education are enrollment or retention, applications, orientation, registration, you name it. There are a lot of use cases. If you have anything that you track on a daily basis, throw it in the chat. I'd love to hear about it. So one thing you need to understand for these types of projects is date scaffolding. And what is date scaffolding? It's actually really simple. It's when you have a list of dates connected to your data source to fill in missing dates. So on the left, we have our date scaffold, April 1st through April 7th. And all the dates are there. They're all accounted for. On the right, we have 7 IDs, and these all have start dates. But you'll notice there are some dates missing, like April 3rd, April 6th. There are no start dates for those. And we also have end dates, and not everyone has an end date. In this case, we are looking at registration. So they have a start date on the day that they registered. And if they withdrew, they have an end date, but not everyone withdrew their registration. So not everyone has an end date. And because there are missing dates there, we have to have a date scaffold to fill in those blanks. So this is an example of a data visualization that I built with a date scaffold. This particular one tracks spring point in time enrollment. So it starts on the first day of registration and it goes through census day, which for us is 10 days after the first day of class. So what do I mean when I say point in time? When you're tracking point in time, it's not necessarily looking at a calendar date. If we're saying, how many days before May 1st, that is different from saying, at what point in time did this happen? So today is November 23rd, as you can see in the red square. Now, a point in time in 2021, on week 48 of the year on Wednesday is November 24th. And point in time in 2020 on week 48 on Wednesday was November 25th. So when I say point in time, I'm comparing week 48, Wednesday of this year to last year and the year before that, etc. You can go back as far as you need to. Now, this viz, when it's live, you can actually hover over each calendar square and see the number of days they are apart. And that is the number that you're going to need to subtract for your date calculation that we're going to do in just a minute. All right, so next we're going to go into Tableau prep, see how to join your date scaffold to your data, write some calculations, create some point in time calculations, and then we'll go into Tableau desktop and build the viz and create some filters and parameters. So we're going to jump right in. Here is our data prep flow. We only have two data sources. We have our data, and then we have our date scaffold. So we're going to familiarize ourselves with the data first. Here we have all of our IDs. There are no duplicates. This may be different in your data, and you need to be aware of it. We also have registration dates for everyone. There are no nulls. And we have withdrawal dates for anyone who has withdrawn, which are mostly nulls. We also have the year and their a couple of attributes, their class level, their major. Now, our date scaffold is even simpler. It is just a list of dates. It is a list of dates from January 1st through December 31st of every year in our data set, which is 2020 through 2022. Now, our date scaffold did not have a year, so I went ahead and created this year of registration, which is just the year of the date scaffold. And I changed it to a string type because we're going to use it to join our data, and the type in our data of year is a string type. So we're going to connect these using an inner join on year. Now you might be thinking, why are you joining it on year? Why aren't you joining it on registration date since there are no nulls? And you could do that. However, I find it better to join it on year because I can then use my date scaffold field to create date calculations with numerous other fields in my data set. So I can use it with the registration date and I can use it with the withdrawal date if needs be. All right, so now we're going to clean up our data a little bit more. First, I removed this year of registration. It was a duplicate of our year field since we did an inner join, and it was just extraneous. Next, we are going to create a point in time date. It's a really simple if-then statement. So if the year is 2022, then we want to look at today. That is our point in time. If our year is 2021, we want to look at today minus 364 days. And if we want to look at 2020, today minus 728 days. Now, this is all well and good if your data is updating live. However, if you're like me and you have your data updates every night at midnight and you're constantly a day behind, you would want to have today minus 1, and then today minus 365, and today minus 729. So just keep that in mind and plan ahead for whatever your use case would need. So now that we have our point in time date, we just want to check and make sure that looks correct. Today is November 23rd, so that's working. And then last year was the 24th, the year before that, the 25th. If you remember from our little reference table, those are the correct dates that we're looking for. So next we're going to write a date diff calculation so that we can see how many days are there between our point in time date and the date on our date scaffold. Now, sometimes I don't remember which order these dates should go in the date diff, but it's actually really easy to check your work and to make a correction if you need to. So let's look at an example on our data set. So 11/25/2020 was our date and time, and our date scaffold is comparing it to June 11th of 2020. June 11th is 167 days before November 25th. And that's the way I want it to work. I want it to be negative if the day is before and positive if the day is after. So the order in our calculation is correct, but if you wanted it to be the other way around, all you'd have to do is switch the order of those dates. Next, we're going to write a calculation to find the first day of registration. Now, I could bring this in a spreadsheet and connect it to our data. However, I have it in a PDF, and it's a lot simpler for me just to go in and type out the day and just convert it to a date format and then update it once every year when I do this. So our registration day, first registration day for 22 was November 8th. In 2021, it was November 5th. And in 2020, it was November 17th. So I write these out as a string, and then I use date parse to find the date parts and then convert it to a date so that we can use it in our date calculations. And we're going to do the same thing for the end of registration. So this is our last day of registration. And then finally, we're going to write one more field, one more calculation called registered. So the reason I'm doing this is because in order to count students who are registered, we want to know if their registration date was before or equal to the current point in time date. And we also want to make sure that their withdrawal date is null, or their withdrawal date comes after the point in time that we're looking at. So for previous years, did they withdraw later in the year than today? So once we have all those fields, we run our output, we're good to go. Now we're going to build our point in time visualization in Tableau. So first, what we want to do is right click on our current point in time and drag that to columns. We're going to select to show all values. And hit OK. Now we have a nice little ticker going on here. Next, we want to count all of our IDs, and we want a distinct count of those. So I'm going to right click, drag that to rows, and choose distinct count of IDs. We've got some nice movement going on. So we want to look at this broken out by year. So I'm going to put year onto color. And at this point, I'm confused. Why are all these straight lines? Before I put year on, it had some nice movement, but now we've got straight lines. Well, this is because we are looking at an aggregate total, not a day-to-day total. So that's why we created this Boolean registered field. So we can just count the students registered on those days. If I drag that up into filters and select true, now this is what we were looking for. This is what we want our point in time chart to look like, except for one problem. Here's today, and here's this flat line for 2022. And why is that there? It's because registration for tomorrow hasn't happened yet. How do we get rid of this annoying flat line of bad data? So I have a field called before today. It's simply checking to see, is the date scaffold before or equal to today? And if I put that into our filters and choose true, zoop, there goes that absolutely awful straight line. So see it again. Zoop, there it's gone. Now we have accurate data. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on our labels. I'm going to make them the same color, a little bit bigger. So now we know exactly which year that we are looking at and seeing the number 4. All right, so you publish this, you give it to your boss, and your boss is like, this is great, this is great. And then a week later, your boss comes back, well, this is still great, but in order to appease all of our end users, we not only need to see where we are point in time, but we also want to see how we are compared to the first day and as we approach the end of registration. And you'll recall we didn't create those date diff calculations in Tableau Prep. We do have the fields for first and last day of registration, but not the actual date diffs. And you could go back into Tableau Prep and you could do those calculations, or you could just do them in Tableau. So we're going to create a field called beginning. And this is simply a date diff at the level of day to see how many days there are from the beginning of registration to the day on your date scaffold. And we're going to do the same thing with the end date. How many days are between the end of registration and your date scaffold? And now that is why we joined our date scaffold to our data on year, because now we can use that date scaffold date in multiple different calculations with multiple different date fields. So next we'll create a parameter. This is just going to be a string parameter with a list of allowable values. We can look at point in time, we can look at beginning, and we can look at the end. So we'll just go ahead and show our parameter. And we'll create a calculated field, which is a simple case when. So in the case of our comparison parameter, if it's showing point in time, then we want current point in time. Beginning, we want beginning, and end, we want end. So we're going to right click on that show comparison and drop it on top of our current point in time pill, select all values. And now we've replaced that current point in time with our parameter selection, so we can look at how many days from the beginning, how many days till the end, or a point in time. So just to clean it up a little bit, I like to go in and format and get rid of these grid lines, and also add a constant line on the 0, because that is always our 0 day. Our day 0 is our point in time that we're comparing against. And I like to format that and just make like a light yellow fill. And I always choose yellow because that is our school colors and that's what I'm used to. So now when we change this, we can see where our comparison point is: the beginning, the end, or our current point in time. And with that, I will open it to questions.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I have a question just about Tableau Prep. How long have you been using Tableau Prep?
For about 3 years, maybe.
Right, okay. And what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out using Tableau Prep? Because I think when you first go to Tableau Prep, it can be a little bit intimidating. You know, you're not quite sure where to start and what to do with it. What advice would you give someone?
I completely agree. My advice is to, well, first of all, I find the Prep and Data group very helpful. They not only post challenges on, is it a weekly or monthly basis? I can't remember. They post challenges frequently, and then they post the solutions to those challenges. So that is one really great way to learn Tableau Prep. Mm-hmm. Another thing that they do is they have a blog where they explain how to do some more complex or in-depth Tableau Prep steps. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, I just kind of get in there and play around. And if you can use smaller data sets to play around with, I find it to be much easier. Sometimes when you have huge data sets that go back years and years, and you may not have enough, like if you're setting a filter, it may filter out all your data and then you can't really see what you're working with. And and if you include all your data, it kind of bogs it down, slows it down, and it's difficult to get through really complex flows. So work with a smaller sample set and just kind of play around with it and you know, come up with a goal that you want to reach and then see if you can figure out how to do it. One thing that I have found is that when I go back and look at a Tableau Prep flow I built a year ago, it is messy and there are so many ways that can be improved upon. So always going back and kind of redoing those and tightening them up and just making them work better. It's a learning process.
Yeah, definitely. I've just been experimenting with Tableau Prep myself, just with a very simple flow, and promptly managed to get quite lost. unless I've just left it and I'm going to come back to it when I'm having a good day, you know. But I think, yeah, I think, as you say, it's just getting stuck in, isn't it? And just having a go and just working things out as you go. And have we got any questions? Let's have a look in the chat.
Believe so.
All right, thanks, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed with prep. I think when I got started using it, there's a YouTube video called "Put Some Prep," series of video. Put some prep in your step. Gives you lots of hints and tips on all of the powerful stuff you can do with Tableau Prep. It sort of help put your your data on steroids in Tableau.
I was finding it too intimidating. I'm sure that'll be helpful, step by step.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Mark.
As with everything in Tableau, undo is your favorite button, right? Yeah. It works exactly the same way as Tableau Desktop. Just press undo, you can't break it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's my favorite button. Right, has anybody else got any questions? We haven't got anything on the Q&A at the moment. Nope. Okay, well, thanks very much for that. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. Right, next we've got Mark, and Mark's going to talk to us about data stories. So are you ready to go, Mark?
I am ready to go.
Excellent.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sharing some of your time with me. As you might be able to tell by my attire, I am a Tableau employee. I'm a solution engineer with Tableau. Let me share my screen and you can see my picture of my gurning face. Here I am. So I've been with Tableau now for about 18 months, just over. I've got a long career in data analytics with lots of scars to show for it. More recently, I've joined Tableau and Salesforce. My job as a solution engineer is to kind of help make sure the customers that I work with, I'm specifically aligned to financial services customers, but the customers I work with are successful technically with Tableau, so helping to implement and troubleshoot and grow adoption for all of our Tableau customers in my patch. What I'm going to talk today about is, kind of come back to it in a second, I'm going to talk a bit about data stories. Now, the super smart people on this call have done a lot of very sophisticated, clever stuff with Tableau, way cleverer than I am. I'm going to very much lean on Tableau and how clever that is for some of the stuff that I'm going to show. Before I kind of leap into the stuff I'm going to talk about, if you are a customer of Salesforce at all, you might have seen something that looks like this hideous slide in the past. But this is essentially a disclaimer that whenever we talk about roadmap and stuff that's coming in the future, and we're going to mention some of the features that are coming to Tableau over the next few months and years, that's subject to change, and essentially you shouldn't make investment decisions based on stuff that doesn't exist yet. Stuff might change. That's essentially what this says. But I'm going to, at Tableau, we've invested quite a lot more recently in tools that help everybody get to insight and take action on top of data. And our mission, as you might be aware, is to help people see and understand data. And that means everybody now. And increasingly, it's becoming the case that everybody from the front line all the way up to the CEO needs to use data in order to make decisions. Now, a lot of the focus in data analytics, a lot of the focus in our product has traditionally been on the left-hand side of this diagram here. So this is kind of a picture of a kind of a typical data value pipeline. where you need to administer, secure, govern your data. You need to prepare your data. You need to use tools like Tableau Prep that you've just seen to prepare, cleanse, join, curate data. You then need to do analysis. Creating your dashboards, your reports, Lorna's excellent small multiples example. A lot of the focus, the investment, the time goes into these kind of parts of the data pipeline. On the right-hand side of this pipeline then is where people start to present and communicate, consume, talk to each other about what the data is telling them, and then what action they need to take in order to drive some value. And traditionally, this has been or can be a place where the process breaks down a bit more. It's in this kind of communicating, consuming outputs that the process kind of breaks down. So we've kind of been aware of this at Tableau. We've invested quite a lot in what we call augmented analytics, or we've also used the term business science in the past. But this is the ability to give everybody access to advanced tools that lets them communicate with their data in plain English, that lets them kind of apply machine learning and data science algorithms in a really easy and accessible way. And the feature I'm going to show you today is data stories. Now, this is our newest feature. It is available today. So if you have the latest version of Tableau Desktop, you can access this. So we're on 2022.3. You can access this feature. If you are one of our Tableau Cloud customers, you can also access this too. And this feature is coming to Tableau Server early in the new year. Essentially what data stories is the ability to take your data, to take your charts and your insights, and to convert visualizations into natural language, automated, dynamic narratives. And this is all with the aim of making analysis and insight more accessible to more people and increasing the adoption of data as a way of making decisions. Let me show you what it looks like. So I have my Tableau environment here, and anybody who's been around Tableau for any period of time will be familiar with the Superstore dataset. I've got a basic dashboard on Superstore here, and this shows sales, profit, margin across states, geographies, and across time. So on. Now, this is a great dashboard, gives me a lot of insights, but if I am a data consumer, I don't necessarily have the time to dig into this dashboard, to pull out all of the insights, all of the things that I need to pay attention to, and then make the decisions that I need to make. This is going to take some time to work through and to ask and answer my questions. What if I had a way of Tableau telling me what was most important to me? Now, when building a dashboard, you've got this new component here that you can add to a dashboard, and it's called data story. And creating a data story is incredibly easy. It has 3 steps. You drag it onto your canvas in exactly the same way as you do any other dashboard object. And then it asks you 3 questions. So the first question is, what component of my dashboard do I want to write a story about? I can make a selection there. Then it's going to ask me, well, within that particular visualization, there are a number of dimensions and measures that you are visualizing. What do you want to talk about, and in what order of priority? So if I want to talk about sales before I talk about profit, that's going to be important to me. If I don't want to talk about profit at all, I can just ignore that part of the visualization. So I choose what I want to focus on, in what order. Question number 2. Question number 3 is the type of story I want to write. Now this is in this case, I've selected a sales by product category visualization. So this is a discrete story type. Another useful story type could be something like trend over time. And of course, the way that you would write a narrative about those 2 different types of analysis would be a bit different. So you can select the type of story that you want to write, and that's it. And instantly, I get a story that's written about my sales by product category that pulls out what is most important here. And you'll see this is fully interactive and exactly the same way as any other Tableau visualization. So I can drill into this down and back up again. And most crucially, this dynamic story responds to selections I make elsewhere in this dashboard. So when I select Texas, for example, the story will rewrite itself to just give me a narrative that is associated with Texas. This is incredibly powerful. I kind of, some of the customers that we're working with, the sorts of use cases that this is really valuable for in financial services, particularly, there are use cases around fund management performance. So when investment customers want to see how their investments are performing, you can write, normally narratives are written manually by teams of people, and they're produced monthly across a whole portfolio of different funds. With Tableau, we've got customers that are able to automate this now and tell people how their funds are reporting and give them interactive reports that lets them drill into particular areas and see how they're performing relative to others. As a financial services specific use case, more broadly, this has uses for a lot of customers for things like regulatory reporting and executive reporting packs. I know certainly in previous lives, I've spent quite a lot of time putting together analytics in PowerPoint decks and Excel spreadsheets that will get packaged up and sent out to exec boards for monthly meetings, and they're all incredibly important and they take ages to pull together. The ability to kind of automate those narratives is a massive time saver for a lot of our customers. Because the real power of this is its customizability. So Tableau, we actually acquired a company called Narrative Science, who originally released this plugin for Tableau, and they have hundreds of patents that exist on the platform that generates the stories against this data. And those patents are there because some of the ways they do this is very sophisticated and very powerful. So I've got the ability, for example, to change how verbose my stories are. I can change my terminology. So when I want to talk about months, for example, I could talk about month here, and when I talk about plurals, I know I want to talk about months, rather than the name of my expression, sum of sales here, I might just want to say sales, and I might just want to say profit. So I can start to kind of match up my analysis with the sort of business language that gets used and the way I'm used to writing my narratives more manually. Taking it a level deeper, you can select the types of analysis that your story does. So beyond what your charts are showing, you can start to look at distributions, correlations, clustering. You can look at drivers of different metrics and define relationships between them. The way you've got actuals versus targets, or this year versus last year, you can start to tag those different measures so that you can have more of a comparative story. And then if I can just come out of that, the story will rewrite. The control that you've got goes right down to an individual row level. So when you write a story, that story is written in sections. I can turn each individual section on and off, and I can even show or hide each individual storyline. And most notably, within a section, I can write a custom story. So this is particularly useful for things like regulatory reporting, where there are very specific story points that you need to pull out that an automated tool might not necessarily capture. And they can be, you can use functions that allow you to define what dimensions and measures to pull out, and add conditions. So only when certain things are true in the data do you display this particular story point. So the level of control that you have over what you write in a story is incredibly granular, very detailed indeed. So that's what the functionality shows. And I would say if you've got Tableau, the latest version of Tableau Desktop or Tableau Cloud, and you haven't tried it already, go in there. It's available. It's there for you. Play with it. Let us know how you get on with it. Where this is going in future, just a couple of words on that. What the acquisition of narrative science as an organization was all about really was building the ability to deliver insights to users in their flow of work where they already exist. So you'll start to see this concept of narrative insights starts to become more pervasive everywhere you are. So rather than embedding a story within a specific dashboards and specific sheets, these insights will be smart and will be delivered to you where you work. It could be on your Tableau homepage. It could be in your portal of choice. It could be in your collaboration tool if you use Slack or Microsoft Teams. Metrics you care about most because the places you go to. Tableau knows where you go looking for your data. Tableau knows what you favorited, what you look at most. Pulling out insights, data change notifications, and really guiding you to the sorts of data that you need to pay attention to, and guiding that analytics experience, meaning that users are not going to have to go hunting for insights in order to make decisions. Tableau is going to be more of a helping hand to get to that outcome. That's everything from me. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions. If you want to know more about this functionality, there's a QR code on screen. You should be able to scan it, and that will take you to some documentation that will dive into all the stuff I've shown in much more depth.
All right, thank you very much. I was just going to ask it, have you, since the inclusion of data stores, have you seen less people using actual visualizations and just using the data store instead, or using like Tandem for like one reporting and then?
They do tend to, it's a very good question. They do tend to go together pretty well. So they sort of, data stores are really helpful, I think primarily as a pointer. So a lot of the time, dashboards can be quite cluttered, quite busy. There can be quite a lot in there. A lot of the time, dashboards are designed to answer as many questions as possible in a single place. And that can be at times quite overwhelming. So what data stories can do is help identify and pull out some of the more pertinent observations. And once you do that, you can then drill into your visualization in order to get a closer look at what you've been pointed to. And of course, the story dynamically rewrites as you do that. So they definitely work well together, rather than separately, I would say.
I need to download the latest version and start playing around with it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think certainly the customer we've got that's using it for fund reporting, like it saves a massive amount of time. And similarly, executive reporting as well. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody on the call who has been involved in creating like regular reporting packs. Sometimes these things can be 200 PowerPoint slides produced every single month, and they all need charts, but also like manual narratives to help guide like deck boards towards the things they need to pay attention to. The time savings are awesome in some cases.
Yeah, that was excellent. I was just wondering when, is there a time when you wouldn't use data stories, would you say? Or is there always a place for it, would you say?
So data stories, I think, also a very good question. I think it's aimed primarily at business users that don't need a picture to paint 1,000 words for them. They want to be able to focus in very quickly on what they need to pay attention to. I think if you are an analyst in Tableau, you are an explorer, or you are a creator, then you're able to speak the language of Tableau in order to do that drag drop analysis to ask and answer questions on the fly. I think data stories really geared towards that business user audience that's short of time and needs a helping hand.
Yeah,
so that's when I'd think about using it most.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love how
Tableau, I guess.
I was just going to say, I love how you can customize it as well, so it's customizable by the analyst, you know, right down to a custom story. So the custom story feature, I think that's going to be so useful, you know.
Yeah, that fine level of control is really it's crucial in a lot of cases. I'd say certainly if you're doing things like regulatory reporting, you know that you always need to pull out particular specific story points, and some things that may be superfluous, and that control kind of gives you confidence that you don't need to manually write these things anymore, and it's still going to tell the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was brilliant. Thanks very much, Mark. Has anybody got any questions for Mark? Do you want to raise your hand? No. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And I think that's it for us, for the Northeast Tableau user group for today. We're planning our next event, which will be a face-to-face event. We're planning that for March in 2023. There will be pizza and there will be beer and soft drinks, of course. We'll be in touch with some details about that in the near future.
We'll be sharing all the slide decks at the end, potentially this week. So, and this recording will be up as well, should be distributed. If we're looking to look back over as well.
Yeah, and if anybody's got any suggestions of what you would like to see in future events, you know, any sort of materials you would like us to discuss, or indeed if you would like to be a speaker yourself, please just get in touch with us. As I say, our contact details are on the slides. So yeah, thank you very much all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.